Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library. I'm here with Danica Nava. We're going to be talking about her book, The Truth According to Ember. It's her first book. And so I love debut authors. I think we're going to have a fabulous conversation. And I'm very much looking forward to it. I have been for several months now. So before we move to her, though, I just want to say a couple things. Thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We couldn't do it without them. And I'd like to thank Danica for letting us share this program with other libraries, because for everybody who knows me, they know that when libraries work together, we just make magic. And this kind of programming to me is magical. So thank you, Danica. Um, you can buy signed books from Danica from Aesop's Fable, our very favorite indie bookstore, and I'll put a link to that in the chat at some point, and certainly email it out to you after the program. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. I will definitely be moderating those to Danica as we talk. And if you want to chat with each other, feel free to do that in the chat. And I always see fun and interesting conversations going on in the chat, even though I take questions from the Q&A. So Danica, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to say that when I reached out to you at first, I was absolutely thrilled and floored that you responded to me. So thank you.
No, thank you for having me. I was like, you want me? You really want me?
I,
Especially so long ago, because when you're a debut, like no one really cares until the book is available. They're like pre-ordering what? We'll
oh
see.
no, I saw your book on NetGalley and I immediately asked for it, and I just love it. So but before we get into the book, because we from our talk before we started, I know we could just talk on and on. Tell me about yourself first. What were you like as a kid? Did you read a lot?
Yes, I read so much. I was a nerd, which I don't think is derogatory, though I was bullied.
Oh,
But I love my little nerdy self. And I was obsessed with Star Wars. My entry to Star Wars was actually at a slumber party when I was 8 years old. It was 2000. So it was on a VHS, and it was my friend's brother's movie. And I just saw the cover and I thought it was beautiful. You see Queen Amidala. And I was like, what is this? I want to watch this. And I guess my friend had seen it so many times because of her brother. And she's like, no. And her dad was like, you have to. She's your guest. She wants to watch it. And so then she was forced to watch this movie that I was obsessed with. Like I came home and all I could talk about was Star Wars, which then my parents showed me the original Star Wars trilogy. And I was obsessed. And then I got to see Spaceballs, which blew my
oh,
mind with humor and comedy. And then Attack of the Clones came out, and Hayden Christensen was the love of my life. And I felt so bad for Corday. She was the decoy that died in the first 2 minutes of the film. And so my first foray into writing was fan fiction, though I didn't know that's what it was called. I didn't have consistent access to internet. There were some years I didn't have internet at all at home. And so I'd just be in my journals writing about Corday's life, how she became a handmaiden, a decoy, and a bodyguard. And there was a lot of Gungan in there. But without George Lucas, I would not be a published author.
wow. Well, that's really impressive. My first, I'm not a writer, but and some people know this, is my first, I tried to write a Nancy Drew book when I was like 8, because I thought that she and Ned should get together, but it didn't work out. Um, so I love that I love that you found something that you loved and then you started writing, as you said, fan fiction. So did you know at that point that you had a love of writing, or was it something that grew over time?
I was always a storyteller. As soon as I could talk, I would tell these elaborate stories to my family, and I would act out these plays and make everybody sit and watch me and my sisters, and everyone had parts and I would write them. And then when I was 14, back when I was writing about Corday, which it's not on AO3 because that didn't exist in my journal. And then when I did have internet, like I just didn't even know about fan fiction. That was like I found out about that like 2014, 2015. I didn't even know about that existed. Um, but I loved Saturday Night Live. So Mel Brooks, specifically Spaceballs. There's some other stuff that like, I couldn't quite get into as young, but Saturday Night Live I loved, and I was obsessed with Weekend Update with Tina Fey and Jimmy Fallon, and I had glasses like Tina Fey, and I just like, that's what I want to be. I want to be on Weekend Update like Tina Fey. And so I would write these skits for all the kids in my neighborhood. And in the summer, we did backyard comedy, and like all the parents would watch. And then my friend, a neighbor, she had a video camera, and I had all these Barbies, and I wrote this like soap opera called Barbie World, and it was like the dark, seedy part of Barbie land. And there was like, I'd used toothpicks and ketchup as like my special effects, and the I thought it was great. I was like, this is funny, this is gold. But yeah, so I was always the storyteller. And then in high school, I fell in love with acting and theater, and especially improv, that I was more shy, especially in class, because I think I was so bullied a lot, that it just forces you to like really like turn into yourself. But being an improv really helped me like discover who I am. And I loved acting on stage. Like I am very much a stage actor. I tried acting for film and TV like in classes, and I just like I'm not very good on the camera. But there's one act plays, and so I started writing those. But what's so interesting, especially when I was in advanced English, none of my teachers, other than the teacher who told me I could be in AP English, was like, you should be in AP English. And I thought it was just because of the books I was reading. But no one's ever fostered saying like you're a great writer. And I didn't grow up in a family that, you know, appreciated the arts. It was like you can't make money from that. And I was told point blank, like, you're not going to college. You're going to go to community college for 2 years because it's free, and then that's it. And so it wasn't like anyone was telling me I could be anything. And no one was showing me how to even apply for colleges, how to get fee waivers. So when you don't know those things, how can you get out of, you know, the poverty line, like where I was? And so that's why I really relate to Ember. I put a lot of myself in Ember because I feel like those hurdles most people don't are not aware of. And here I am, despite all that, with now I have an MBA and a published book. But yeah, it wasn't until I got with my husband, we just moved in together, and it was a lazy Sunday. And I just was sitting on the couch, and I told him, yeah, I always thought the one day I could write a book. And he was like, one day, why not? Why don't you just do it? And I was like, smarter people write books, better people write books. You know, I believed that lie I had been fed, that I wasn't good enough, and that smarter people went to college, smarter people did finance and could do Excel. I wasn't one of those people. And he was just like, why don't you just try? What would it be? And I literally took that as a dare. And the next day, I know because my boss wasn't there, and I was up in this executive floor with nothing to do. And I just opened Word, and I wrote the first chapter about a paralegal working in Southern California, and just like, and then what if this happened? And I just gave myself these weird prompts, like, and then what if this? And I didn't really understand like a full book plot. So like the pacing was really rushed. The ending, you know, I was like, I just want to get them to kiss. You know, that's what I'm writing towards. So yeah, without that conversation and that, like, it just, I don't know that it would. I think eventually it would have happened, but it would have been different. It would have taken a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what led you to specifically writing romance? You said you just wanted them to get to the kiss, but were you reading romance? Were you writing romance? What was it that appealed to you?
Okay, you guys don't judge me, but I literally cannot read or watch anything that doesn't have a romance subplot, or it's not like the main plot. Like I need something to root for. You know what I mean? That sexual tension, it's delicious. Like, and then if I'm watching something and there's like a villain, you know, it's like that's why we got Raylo, you know, it was like, give us that. That's what I yearn for. I'm so disappointed the Acolyte was canceled. Disney did us dirty. We could have had it all. We could have had it all. And then they were scared. They were terrified of us. So yeah, I love romance. I love Sophie Kinsella, Meg Cabot, Helen Fielding, Bridget Jones's Diary. All those movies I was just so obsessed with. I think I've seen How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days a million times. I thought it was the best thing in the world. And I always wanted to write one. I was like, I can do that. Nora Ephron, I was like, I can do that. And, and then it was more like, why? And I was just waiting. I'm like, when are we going to get a Native American rom-com? And there technically is one. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Christmas in the Clouds. And I don't think it's that bad. I watched it. I did a live reaction. I thought it was pretty cute. It wasn't written by an Indigenous woman, nor was it directed by an Indigenous woman, but most of the cast are Indigenous, apart from the main characters. The main characters are white people who, yeah, I think one's Greek. But that was like the early 2000s where it was like, if you're ethnically ambiguous, sure, you can play a native character. But Graham Greene's in it. He plays a vegan chef and he's like really funny. And Wes Studi has a cameo. So that does exist. And I didn't know about it until this year. But from like in my sphere of, I'm like, this doesn't exist. I want one. And
Mhm.
then I thought, what would that look like? And I actually had a different manuscript I was working on. It was a Jane Austen retelling. It
Mhm.
was Northanger Abbey. And I called it Northanger Medium, where my Catherine Morland, she could talk to spirits. Or so she thought. I was really writing it in this way where like, can she, or is she like fibbing? And then Henry Tilney is this FBI agent who comes into town, and she's obsessed with these crime shows, and it's really like making fun of like what Jane Austen was doing with the Gothic romance. And so she gets in his head that he's here like investigating some crazy, case, and she's trying to help him, and they kind of have this romance and fall in love. And then you find out it's just credit card fraud that he was there investigating. But and they were both Indigenous. And my father passed away right when I was in the middle of writing that. And so I haven't been able to look at that manuscript again. So then I had to like wait for another story to just to get right back into the swing of things of writing and get that muscle going again. And so I had this vision of a workplace romance, and she was an accountant and he was an IT guy. And the imagery in my head, I was like, okay, what is this story? Who are they? And from that concept to this book, it started in different mediums. So it was actually I started a feature screenplay, and it just wasn't, the magic just wasn't flowing, wasn't right. So I was like, okay, it's bigger than 90 minutes. Okay. How about a mini series with the brother and the best friend? So I know everything that happens in Sage's story and who he ends up with, and I know everything that Joanna does. But then again, I was just like, I don't know. I really love novels. Like I think this is a novel. And then I started writing it, and again, it just wasn't right. And then my baby was 4 months old. I had a new job where I had to be in the office every day. I was hired saying it was going to be hybrid. I'd only have to be in the office 2 days, but it turned out every day I had to be in the office. And this executive made me stay late, sometimes till 7, even though I had evening classes to finish my MBA. And so I just was very frustrated because I started working 8 months postpartum and in the office without, and he wouldn't give me an opportunity to even pump. It was very frustrating. But we do what we have to do to get food on the table. So it was one night I finished work, I finished my classes, and then I was like, maybe I should wash my hair. I haven't done that in a while. And that story just was like in my head. And I started pondering to myself, like, how did Ember get the job? Because I had been starting like she was already an accountant and she had a crush on Kyle, and Donovan was going to be like the friend that was there all along. But it just wasn't right. He was too charismatic when I was writing him. And so that was the big problem. And so I was like, how did she get the job? And it just clicked. And so I put my pajamas back on, and the last thing I wanted to do was go back in my chair at my desk. But I did. I thought to myself, my life will never change unless I write this story. I know this is special. I know people will want this story. I know a publisher will want this story. And the first chapter just flew out of me, and her voice just hit me. Like, it was just so unique and distinct. Like, Ember is just, I was like, this is the story. This is how she gets there. And it was so quick to get the story finished. Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, wow, that's really fascinating because um, you know, you don't hear often that a story just came to somebody. It's usually like this long slog of, many, many edits, which maybe happened after you started writing it. But I think that's really fascinating. So we're getting some questions about um, you being an Indigenous writer, and I know that you are enrolled in the Chickasaw, right?
Chickasaw Nation, yes.
Chickasaw Nation, right? What does that actually mean to be enrolled in? Because as opposed to born into, like how does that work?
Well, I am born into. So
Yeah.
what it is a political distinction. So the plot point is Ember checks the Caucasian box instead of the American Indian, Alaskan Native ethnicity question, because a lot of these job applications, I've come across a few that let you check all that apply, but mine is like you can check one. And if you're American Indian, you cannot be Latino, Hispanic Latino. You
Mhm.
know, if you're Caucasian, you cannot be Hispanic Latino American. You know what I mean? And I am.
Mhm.
I My father is Mexican, his mother is Mexican, and we have um, Latin American indigenous ancestry as well.
Mhm.
And then on my mother's side, we have a lot of settler ancestry and Native American Chickasaw. And so to be enrolled, it varies tribe to tribe. We have 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. That means the federal government recognizes them. And then there's state level tribes where the federal government doesn't because it doesn't meet certain requirements. And then there are tribes that are not recognized state or federal level because the enrollment numbers are so small or for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And so I don't want to weaponize enrollment against those who cannot for various reasons. I say that I am enrolled, and it's synonymous. I have citizenship within the Chickasaw Nation. That's how we classify it. But when you go to apply for citizenship, it's tribal enrollment forms. So it's one and the same. But the Chickasaw Nation is part of the 5 tribes. In history books, you may see it as the 5 civilized tribes, but I don't like to say civilized because all tribes are civilized. We have civilizations. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And but the 5 tribes in Oklahoma banded together, all the governors, and they created legislation that the quote unquote blood doesn't run out. And so you have some tribes that have blood quantum requirements, and that varies on percentages of who can be considered a legally enrolled member in their tribe. And then you have ours that have descendancy. And to get descendancy, we have the Dawes rolls. And the Dawes rolls is also a complicated topic because during the land grab, right, the 5 tribes were displaced into Oklahoma. I'm sorry, this is a lot of history that some people didn't sign up for. But the tribes were displaced from their homelands into Oklahoma, and there were tribes that were already there. So there was a lot of conflict. And then there were land grabs. Some people may be familiar with the Oklahoma Sooners. It's the Oklahoma State University team. There's no Oklahoma football team, but everybody loves the Sooners there. And what are the Sooners? The Sooners are the settlers that came in a land grab and took land from the indigenous people. So like this history is just prevalent. Like these, it's just there. So I know that my ancestor was part of the Chickasaw government, and he was very pro enrollment on the Dawes rolls because this was how we could get the numbers. And the Chickasaw Nation successfully sued the United States government because we were promised money to be displaced and they never provided it. And I believe it's 1971, though feel free to fact check me. I think it's on our website. But they were successful to sue the United States government to get money. They used that money, invested it in infrastructure. And we are a prosperous tribe. And so we have had at one point the world's largest casino. I think it's ranked number 3 or something. Monaco built a new one, but it's the WinStar in Backerville, I think, outside Tishomingo. It's near the border of Texas and Oklahoma. And so using those profits, they reinvested into the tribe and the infrastructure and education and grants and housing. And I'm just so blessed that I'm able to be a part of this community. And so for me I am enrolled, I am a citizen, I'm recognized by my tribe claims me, but I don't want to weaponize that for people who can't, because there are people like Lily Gladstone, for example, can't be legally enrolled in the Blackfeet Nation because her blood quantum is below the threshold. However, she is embraced. She was honored in a huge ceremony. And so she says she's a descendant. And so technically I'm also a descendant, but because of the legal structure, they got rid of the blood quantum. So yeah, that's another long-winded.
No, but again, fascinating because a lot of us don't know this. And then going into your writing, reading your book and learning a little bit about Ember, that sort of background really is really helpful, because she has to check, she's like you said, she doesn't check it because there's no options for her. And what happens when she unchecks the Native American box? She gets an interview, which
That
is
was very much inspired by my experience. The only reason I was able to go to college was through the Chickasaw Nation and their grants. I would never be a college graduate without their support helping me get my paralegal certificate. And the higher education office, they were all so wonderful, so supportive. They would hop on the phone. How can we help you? Okay, you need help doing this, and I didn't have access to that when, like, thank God for the internet. Like, it has its problems, but growing up in California away from the tribe, my mom grew up between Oklahoma and California, but there's no jobs out there. So my family would come to California, work, save up a little bit of money, go back to Oklahoma, build the house on the land, and then come back when they ran out of money. And it was like that for years. Um, so to grow up in California away from the tribe and resources, and then there was no internet, you know, that happened, when I was young, but still, there was no internet to connect you with these resources and things. And so even in high school, I didn't even know it existed. And I was technically program enrolled. Um, and it's paperwork. You have to have like, it was a long process to get me enrolled because my grandfather had passed away. So my mom had to get his death certificate and birth certificate and hers and then notary and all that. And a official California, like from the state capital seal, birth certificate. And that costs money to get those copies. So there are barriers. However, the tribal enrollment offices are so nice and they will like help you get what you need because
Mhm.
they want the enrollment numbers to go up. But so anyway, it's very important to me when I finished my college education and I was moving from being a paralegal working hourly to an executive assistant job, that these companies knew it was a Chickasaw woman doing it. Like, I worked so hard. I'm so proud of where I come from, where I've been. And my resume, I worked very hard with my professors and with the, employment office. And so I had this awesome resume. I thought it was the best thing ever. And I was getting nothing, getting nowhere. And I was like, how do I have years of being a paralegal, working at these law firms, billable hours? I felt like I had made it. And then I was getting nothing. And so then I started just checking Caucasian
Yeah.
interviews galore. And it's like, I can't say, causation, correlation. It's fishy. I can't say they're all racist, but it happened in Chicago too. And then when I moved back to LA, and then when I was in the Bay Area, which
Mhm.
is when I had the baby and I was in business school. And so that part hadn't been part of the story for so long of how she got there. And it just made so much more sense with the rest of the plot and everything that happened. So I'm not Ember, but a lot of the things that I've experienced influenced the story. And I think a lot of debuts put so much of themselves into it because it's such a personal journey,
Mhm.
even though it's a lighthearted rom-com. Like, I talk about these topics in a fun way. Oh, I hope I didn't scare you.
Nope, not at all. I'm here for you. So let's talk about Ember, because when I read the title and it was said The Truth About Ember, The Truth According to Ember, you get sort of I got a sort of different perspective on how it was going to be, but she actually she lies a lot. Um, the thing with the applying for the job, which I totally get because like I would totally do that as well. But she lies a lot, even when she doesn't have to, even when she realizes she doesn't have to. What was that for her? Like, what was the reasoning behind her character?
Her character is very insecure. She's been fed this lie, like we all have been fed this lie, this capitalist lie, that we have to be better than we are. You're not worthy of love or personship unless you have the job title, the pay, the car, the engagement ring, the everything. And it's always like more and more and more we're fed, you need this brand, this, that. Do you see this influencer? You're going to be happy if you have what this influencer's wearing, you know, a flat tummy, toned arms. So she's just constantly fed this and she's moved away from Ada. She's moved into Oklahoma City. She's trying to do it on her own. And that's another lie she tells herself. So she's not like she's just outwardly telling lies to everybody else. She's telling lies to herself that she has to do everything on her own, that she can't ask for help. If she asks for help, it's weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has to learn that journey that, to ask for help is a strength. And especially in the Indigenous community, where community is so important, it's so vital, how we raise each other up. We don't believe that if you succeed in any way, it takes away from me.
Mm-hmm.
That's another lie. And so she, and then also like I had to add more stakes. So how to increase the tension is like another lie. It became it was a motif, but I think there's like 11 lies she told or something. Maybe the last count.
Yeah. I actually really, really liked her. I thought she was snarky and funny and pretty self-aware for knowing that she was lying a lot, but also I just thought she was really funny. And I know that's what you were going for, but like some of her internal dialogue just cracked me up. As she was thinking about it. And then you were talking about the internet and how she uses the internet because she doesn't know what she's doing. She gets a job, but she doesn't know what she's doing, right? So she's constantly like, okay, Googling how to write a spreadsheet.
Listen, Google has been my best, and YouTube, like watching a YouTube little tutorial of how to set things up or how to use a formula, that's just so real. I feel like everybody does that. And her resume, which she does fib, but it's like, is she though? I feel like it's branding. She's balancing a register at a bowling alley. That's accounting adjacent.
Yep.
You can do it. You can learn these things.
Yeah.
And especially for entry level positions, it's like you're supposed to train those people. That's why they're entry level. That's why you're paying them crap. Mm-hmm. But now, again, it sounds like I'm very anti-capitalist with an MBA. But companies will try to get more for less. They will try to take advantage of any employee to make more profit for themselves. So if they can get away paying somebody $11 an hour, even though they have 3-4 years experience and they should, lower titles, lower pay, everything, that they're going to try to get away with it.
Yeah. And she just had, talk about barriers and challenges. Oh yeah, she had the lies, but a lot of them, at least the beginning, were to the purpose of getting to the next step for her. And then she wanted to prove herself, which was amazing. Like she wasn't lazy. She wasn't, she was willing to do the work, but there was a lot of challenges for her. And I thought she just was funny. Like the way she dealt with things or thought about things and how she, but she recognized racism when she saw it. She recognized micro and macroaggressions. Did you feel like she called them out enough? Like, would you have called them out if you had experienced them like that?
No. I think it's so funny because I've been tagged in some reviews and things like that. So I have seen some feedback where people have said it was totally outlandish, or they would have gone straight to HR and they would have told somebody off. And it's like, no, you wouldn't. You don't know what it's like to like, you need food. And I have been in a situation where I worked for a billionaire executive and he was sitting right next to me, right at my desk, because he was looking over my shoulder working on something. And then he rarely asked me about myself. And so he caught me off guard and he asked how I paid for college. And these older gentlemen, this is a theme, but I experienced this a lot in my jobs where older executives love to ask me how I paid for college because these boomers know that they ruined the cost of education for us all. Like just being real, like you'd be like, when I went to college, it was $700. I'm like, good for you. So nice. So it was like, how did you pay for college? And I said, well, my tribe, Chickasaw Nation, helped me pay for college. Oh, you're Indian, huh? Your grandmother's a slur referring to Native women. And I had never heard that to myself. I mean, I studied the word. I got my undergrad in communication and I did my whole capstone on the representation of Native American women in film. And so you have the slur, which I'm not going to say, and then you have the princess, right? The celluloid princess that they called them. And since the dawn of film, which were these Westerns with the Indian princess and the cowboys and whatever. So I was totally taken aback. And I just had to sit there with a smile because if I didn't smile at him, it was a whole thing. Um, I will say that I've become more confident in myself. And a previous employer, he also was extremely racist and would say the N word. And I was getting an MBA and I was like, I'm employable. And I told him, I think that's racist. How dare you say that in my presence? And he would just laugh. And well, I started immediately applying for new jobs and I would show up to work in like the future is female shirts. Like it was extremely passive aggressive. I was like, no, we're not doing this. I know your language now, having gone to business school. I used to think these executives had to be so brilliant to be CEOs. They had to be so smart to get in this position. And then when I got there, I just was confronted with mediocrity. I'm like, oh, your parents funded this, or and the nepotism. I experienced it all. So I guess I'm a little bit more jaded. I hope I'm not rubbing anybody the wrong way on this call.
I just heard this. I just heard this word the other day: failing forward.
Failing up. Yeah, that's right.
Failing
they can just continue to fail up. Yeah. And so I have been more vocal, but young me, who took 7 years to get my undergrad. So I'm 24, 23, 24. And like this, it took forever to even get the job, right? And that I'm confronted with that. I did go to the VP of HR and I had a conversation of like, what can I do? And she said, what can you do? He owns a company.
Oh,
so when you're in the private sector, that you have less protections. And then when you get into the tech and nobody knows what they're doing and they just have all this fun money that's been, invested and they're just doing team meetings and flying off, jet setting. It's a weird world. In the confrontation with Kyle, I had originally written that because she spit a loogie to the guys in the bar. And I said, oh, that'd be a really funny like callback that she just does that. But my editor was like, I don't know that we can have her physically assaulting him. Like, I don't think anyone would root for her in this situation.
bummer.
But I thought he got his comeuppance from her. She let him have it. But Mr. Stevenson, the CEO, is insulated. What happens? Nothing happens to those men. And that was very intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about romance is you always want everybody to get what they deserve. The happily ever after, the villain gets, whatever, buried or has to grovel or learn something. But sometimes that's not real how life is.
No, I try to really ground this in so much reality, but I did have a lot of empathy for Ember. And so that's why I didn't judge her choices because I made her do them. But I am not a liar. Like that is a pet peeve when people lie. I'm like, why are you always lying? That TikTok that's popular. But I'm like a human lie detector. I'm like, this person's just BSing me. Like they just can't tell it straight. People have tells, but it makes for a compelling character to write, especially when I'm trying for her character growth. And I just felt like it really made sense and that you're supposed to feel anxious when you're reading the story. It's so hard for people who are non-native, non-BIPOC to ever know what it's like to live in our shoes. And the only way that I can give you a taste of that is through a first person point of view. And the only way to do that is to up the stakes. And she's lying and you're cringing and you're like, oh, she's going to get caught. I'm anxious. You're now feeling what it's like, a smidgen of what it's like to be in our shoes.
So those were two words that I definitely thought of when I was reading this, is that it was very grounded in reality for a work of fiction and rom-com, but also the anxiety. There was definitely anxiety there because you can't lie and never ever get caught because you only have so many pages to write, right? So yeah. Totally. But that brings us to the first question that I wanted to ask from our audience. Somebody asked, being an Indigenous writer, what do you hope non-Native folks take away from reading?
I get this question a lot. And there's two things. One, that we exist and we're everywhere and we're in the contemporary context. We laugh, we love, we have some traumatic history, but that doesn't define us as people. I think that generational trauma, like we do inherit that, but we also live day to day and we got to get our bills paid and we fall in love and we're funny. Like we go through some hard things, but we laugh through it, at least my experience and definitely how I view the world. Like, I have to crack a joke or I don't want to cry. So that would be the first one. And then the second one is definitely community. How we don't have to do everything ourselves. You are allowed to ask for help. And if the people around you, if you ask for help, say no or shun you as like you should be able to do this on your own, those aren't the people you want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
At the heart of humanity is community. Like you want to talk about civilization, that's community, that's village, you know. So coming back to that, I think a lot of Western culture forgets that.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be those two things.
Absolutely. Those are great. What do you hope all folks will take, not just the non-natives?
The same thing, but that I'm funny. I don't know.
That's a good answer. But
that I want to see movies with
yeah.
native characters and not just rom-coms, but you rarely see any native actor considered for any other role.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when Wes Studi got the role in Heat, like why aren't we all considered for these types of roles? Like, so I hope like challenging that person, like, yeah, we deserve to be in any role. They can be a banker, they can be, and without the qualification, you know. And when I was in screenwriting classes, why is this character native? I'm like, why does it have to be white? Like, we don't have to qualify for a blonde chick to be in here. Like, well, can you just say she's a brunette? I'm like, no, she's native.
Yeah.
You know, and so that we have to qualify like why somebody is there because there's so few of us.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, another one.
No, I mean, I agree. And also like I always wonder like when they make a movie, why do they have to take a British actor to play an American accent? Like, aren't there enough American, actors to play in that movie? That's just me. But so the same sort of like on a very light note, that same thing of like, there's so many people that can do this stuff, like, in that, in all areas. So I just want to follow up with that with another question about, there seems to be a growth in indigenous writing hitting mainstream. And the thing I find interesting about this comment is all of these books are pretty serious, except for the Scarlet St. Clair, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Tommy Orange, Melissa Blair, but there seems to be a serious lack of romances, non-fantasy by indigenous authors. What do you think about that?
Well, I love Scarlett St. Clair. I'm such a huge fan. She doesn't write indigenous characters yet. However, the vampire one.
Oh yes,
King of Battle and Blood, was that what it's called?
Yeah,
I read that one, and I did watch her talk about because it's a fantasy world, that her character is definitely a person of color, and there are parts of her Muskogee heritage that are layered in, but it's not Muskogee because it's in this fantasy world. And so I love that I want to write fantasy so bad. I wish I had her brain. There is this indigenous lit renaissance because we had Louis Zerdich, Linda Hogan, she's a Pulitzer nominated author, she's Chickasaw, and Tommy Orange. And they're all amazing. And Tommy, I've mentioned this a few times in my book tour because Tommy Orange, he had a sequel come out, Wandering Stars, and he did this interview and he was like, I'm not going to give people a colorful tour of Indian country. And I read that and I was like, I don't think that's what I did, but we write very similar thematic elements with addiction, abandonment, these heavy topics, and we write about them in such a different way. His prose is so beautiful, and mine I feel is like more snappy because I did write this commercial piece of fiction, rom-com, and I felt like that's how I'm able to talk about these things and even process them myself through this romance, so that there's a happily ever after at the end, because I want a happily ever after. I feel like I felt enough sadness, and so I really want joyful. I want to see our joy. I want to see us celebrated in a major romance, because romance is $1 billion industry, and it's sad that the only representation we have are these bodice rippers from the 90s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And it's Fabio, even him pretending to be a Comanche. I saw that one. It's just called Comanche by Fabio, ghostwritten by some lady. And we deserve better. Yeah. And I thought, well, I'll just take a crack at it. Surely there's better people out there who've done this already. And then when I'm getting ready to query, there hadn't been any book sales.
Not romance, not rom-coms for sure. But did want to mention two other authors, Louise Erdrich, who I don't know if you read, and Stephen Graham Jones. He writes
Yes.
horror. Oh,
Yes.
so good.
He he is amazing. Really tough release month or season with Stephen Graham Jones coming out with like two right as I'm releasing my debut, and it was like the sales numbers so different. But yeah, he's phenomenal. I'm a huge fan. And Louise Erdrich, obviously Roundhouse and Love Medicine and The Night Watchman, she's phenomenal. And
Yes.
her daughter is so lovely. She read my book and went on her local news station and to talk about books, and she had my arc, and it was like so well loved. It was so worn, and like she said that everybody in the bookstore, because they own Birchbark's books in Minneapolis, and she said every single person in the store read it and loved it. And it's an uncorrected proof. And I was like, did Louise Erdrich look at that? Because so we have to do a blurb list, and I was like, well, I mean, the most famous Indigenous writer is Louise, but I was like, I don't think I can get like, you've read chapters 25 through 29. I'm not going to give that to Louise.
But they're so good.
Never. I wouldn't be able to look her in the eye. She wouldn't think me serious, you know.
Talk about native joy. It's great.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Yeah, I do think like the question was like there's more authors. It's true, there's more authors, but there's not this wide swath of Indigenous authors writing from in every genre, which I think is so courageous of you to write a rom-com when there's nothing else out there.
What, and I can only tell it my way.
Mm-hmm.
Like this one book cannot speak for a whole demographic,
Right.
because no two tribes are the same. We have different cultures, beliefs, languages, and all I can do is my best. And I know I'm not going to be the last. I've had so many Indigenous writers enter my DMs, sending me photos of them in tears, reading the dedication, reading the ending, saying that I've inspired them to finish their stories. And if I have any resources, I'm always like just sharing everything I've learned, because that we don't write in a vacuum. We write influenced by the media that we consume, and so like that is just the dream.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So let me go to this question from Emma. Danica, have you seen the movie Big Eden? It's a romance movie from the year 2000 with an interracial native white gay romance. It was cute, and I think it's pretty good for being from the year 2000. The native lead is actually Indigenous.
No, I've never even heard of that.
Big Eden. Let's all go out and find it.
Big Eden.
Yes.
I'm writing it down. Well, in 2000, like I wasn't allowed to be watching romance stuff.
Yeah. Then let's get into a little bit about the writing. You said Ember sort of came to you at first. What was the rest of your writing process like?
It was definitely, well, Ember and then Danica. And it was so interesting. I was just writing like, okay, this bullying scene. She's like, okay, I'm getting rejections. And then, well, she gets an interview. What is that interview like? Oh, she meets Danica. Okay. And, we all consume story. So we, in oral tradition, we're humans, right? We all come from the same background. So we all know story and subconsciously. And so it was really just writing what felt natural. But there were moments where she was refusing to answer her phone. And I was like, why isn't she answering his phone? Who's calling her? And I realized, oh, her brother's in jail. And it's so funny. I like themes and symbolism that comes from readers. Like after you've written a piece and you can kind of like start deciphering those things. I didn't go with the intention of I'm writing this piece, this commentary on poverty and incarceration. And, I just wrote what I knew and what felt natural and right. Like Donna was his caretaker. Okay, what's his family like? Oh, he has a sister. Her sister has Down syndrome. And that's another thing. I've never seen any characters with Down syndrome in rom-coms, and not in a way that's like done to her and a pitying thing. Do you know what I'm trying to get at? Mm-hmm. So it was just so important to me that I had characters that felt fully realized and so real. And that was the most fun, was like discovering how their voices differ. Joanna talks differently than Ember talks. Tito speaks differently than Sage, and Auntie speaks differently from them all.
Mhm.
And it was, and how can I make myself laugh? And I call myself a comedy writer first and foremost because I love SNL. I started in sketch writing, and so I would write these chapters. Like chapter 4, the magic chapter, it never changed from when I first drafted the first draft to 2 revisions, 2 rewrites, and querying and through my agent and editor at Penguin Random House Berkeley. Other than like copy edits and comma usage and things like that, never changed. It is like the magic, and it's just so funny. And that to me, like I feel like you can rip that out and put it on the screen, and you can play it as a movie. And the Little Bighorns, I didn't know there was going to be a bowling league, but I needed to have more conflict. And then there's these people, and I don't believe in having just these side characters with no names, or like I want, why are they there? Oh, they have their own history of this, like, so that's how that process went of like, what if this happened? What if that happened? And then I really just want them to kiss, and they're not kissing yet. And then I got to wrap this up.
Go to those later chapters, man. Actually, I did remember, I know of another Indigenous author, Maggie Blackbird. No?
Why does that sound familiar?
She's from Canada, but she writes steamy Indigenous romance.
Oh,
Yeah.
Maggie Blackbird, another thing I'm writing down. I
Because
know Robin Covington. She had in 2020, she wrote something billionaire. It's the Red Hawk reunion series through Harlequin.
we'll have to check it out. John asks, have you heard of Peter Principle? I think there's a misspelling in there. Peter Principle.
No.
John, respell that and I'll ask.
Is it a romance writer, John?
Let's find.
I know I'm the worst. I'm like, ew, did they write something with a romance? I have not. I read a lot of Meg Cabot. Like the genre that I love is rom-com, and it's just so sad that there's so few Indigenous stories. I love Nikki Payne. Nikki Payne's book Sex, Lies, and Sensibility came out, and my book deal hadn't been announced, so she didn't know that I was at the same imprint. But I loved Pride and Protest, and so I saw her cover reveal, and I was like, "That dude looks Native." And she's like, "Yes, ma'am. Bears from the Abenaki Nation." And I was like, "I thought I had to write this to get it," and so I highly recommend that.
Oh, okay. We were going to talk about recommendations, but I'm going to keep going with questions. Got just a couple more. Joyce asked, did you agonize over your first sentence? Did it change much during the editing process?
The first sentence, I never like, if anyone's looking to start a book and you're like, oh, this first sentence needs to get right, forget that. It's never going to be right. Writing is rewriting. And so the first sentence changed multiple times because I knew I needed to grab an agent. And so I opened up and I looked at some of my favorite books. But if you look at some of your favorite authors, like their newest, the first sentence is nothing because they already have a built-in audience. They don't need that. Look at those first ones, those debuts. You're going to really see those catchy sentences. And so I tried it at first where Ember had the lies. It was called Little White Lies, the original title that I queried with. But the first few sentences, I was like, it's just not hooky enough. It's not hooky. So I was really playing with that. She just didn't think of herself as a main character or a leading lady. She's just like a background character. Like we see a lot of these Indigenous, they're kind of relegated to the background. And my critique partners, they liked it, but it's something I was like, no. And then it was like in the middle of the night, and I was like, her voice, like, I was not always a liar. And I was like, that's it.
It's great because it really sets up the entire book.
Yes. Yes.
It was perfect. So somebody asks, you have many characters who pass through the book. I wonder how you decided on the names of your characters. Do you say the names out loud to see if it fits what you plan to write about them?
I'm so sorry, you cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you say the names out loud to see if they fit how you plan to write the character?
So for like the major characters like Sage, Donawa, Walela, yes. I'm so bad with like other side characters. It was literally so many people read this book, and it was like the final proofreader was like, so I noticed you have like 2 Phoebes and you have 3 Debs, or what? Are they the same? And I'm like, I do. I had no idea. I'm unoriginal when I'm like coming up with these other side character names. Like I said Tom 4 times. I don't know. But I wish it could be like, very, very intentional and like, yes, it had to be Bucky though. Okay, Bucky's inspired by my Uncle Luffy. And so I was like, what's an Okie name that like gives off, and so I did Bucky. And what's so funny is I wrote this before I watched Reservation Dogs. I was very much like, I don't want to be influenced by me, like this we're going to be so original. And then he has a character Bucky, and I was like, it just had to get out. Like we're all on the same wavelength and like Okie writing.
Oh, wow. So John did get back to us. The Peter Principle by Lawrence Peter and Raymond Hull is a humorous business book that discusses how employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. You talked about how CEOs were not what you thought they should be. So
I've not heard of that. I wish after business school, I'm like, no more Harvard Business Review, no more.
nothing serious, just rom-coms.
No. No, that sounds intriguing. I'll have to check it out.
I do want to talk about Danua. I knew I was going to say it wrong. Danua? No.
Donawa, yes.
Danawa. Because I do not want to call him Dan because that's
He asked to be called Donawa.
Yeah. Danawa, yes, that's his name. So I want to talk about him because he's just so awesome. Like, did he just come to you like Ember did, or how did you create his character?
Ember needed a foil because she has so much going on, and he could not be a mess too. And so this is very much like, that's why they say it's a women's fiction leaning, because you have Ember's full character arc. It's very much like so much more than just will they, won't they get together. And having her have a partner who's well adjusted, I think was such a lesson in herself and like learning to love, because she has so much abandonment. She hasn't had a good father figure. And yeah, I just was like, I want the nice guy, the cinnamon roll. We can read all the alpha holes that we want, like the time or place, but like for Ember, she couldn't, that's not what she needed. She needed the nurturing. And so it was so indulgent to write this book.
Well, their relationship was so adorable too. I mean, I know that there's the HR issues and things like that, but they were so goofy. I really like that about them.
I love real relatable people. There was an article spinning around on threads and stuff like the anti-billionaire romance, and I was like, got you. Like falling in love is the closest that I think we'll ever really experience magic. Like it feels so magical when you fall in love. And it doesn't only happen to beautiful rich people, or the rom-com poor people who inherit some gorgeous vintage house, and they have a cupcake business, like for me, it's hard to relate to that. It's like, no, I had like really bad roommates and I was working 3 jobs at once. Like that's poor, and then also food's very important. And so every book of mine, they're going to be eating. Yeah. I'm like, why don't these people eat? And it's also it shows love. Like Ember will make her little fried corn burritos and ramen, and it's nurturing. Like, and then you can have this like beautiful conversation that needs to happen over a meal. And so I love that.
Yeah. I think one of the first scenes was with her and her roommate making the little burritos. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I just thought that's how you have a roommate.
Yeah.
You do things together, you enjoy each other's company, and you get along and you have things in common, but yet you stir each other on. Like they really helped each other. I thought I love that too. Like I guess that's what I think too. Like I love any story that has found family. And it felt like that was like for her, like sister, like a real sister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love their relationship. I didn't have a roommate like that, but romance is aspirational too around the genre.
Well, I think that the thing that I felt like you did right with the story is that it wasn't all about work and it wasn't all about Danua. It was, she was layered. I'll say that, like an onion.
Yes, like Shrek. There were too many Shrek references. I was like, I don't know, I wrote this many references to Shrek when I was doing past pages. Listen, that was like my introduction to like humor and comedy, and anyway. I think Shrek's the best romantasy out there. Like if you want to learn about romantasy storytelling and world building, Shrek is like the place to go.
I think we have some agreement in here.
Connor, yeah, long
Somebody asked
stretch supremacy.
Sam asked earlier on if you would ever teach history because you're just so fascinating. You just know your history and the not just the history, but the legal and the political and the, just so many aspects of what is happening in your culture.
Um, I I have been asked to teach writing. Unfortunately, I
Oh,
had started my new job and they wanted me to teach in Oklahoma this summer program, and I was like, I don't think I'll get the PTO, and the schedule was such that I couldn't do my remote job in the evening. Um, so I have been asked to teach history. I never thought that I was like a history buff, so that's so flattering. Um, my goal was to actually go to law school and to study American Indian law. But then I had a CEO tell me I needed to get an MBA, and then he was fired. The company was supposed to pay for it, and then I was on the hook paying for it, and I'd gotten in. So I stumbled upon an MBA. However, when my child, and if I have any other, are out of the house, I don't believe there's an age limit. Like you can go to school, and I do think I will eventually do law school. I just am so interested in law. I love legal writing, and
wow.
I'm a dork. I don't know. I love learning. I just love learning. Like the world. Like I grew up very, very sheltered in this like very conservative Christian home, and like I knew I was Chickasaw, and I was in Indian education, and like we went back to Oklahoma a couple times. But like I grew up like you know it very much in a bubble, and I didn't know about other people's experience. And then when I got to college, it just opened up my eyes, and I'm very like hungry, and I read voraciously. So yeah, maybe one day. Never say never.
Never. We won't. We won't. We will look forward to you, whatever adventures you do. But we have a couple more minutes. I did want to ask you what's next for you or Ember. Are we going to see more Ember?
It's so funny. I've gotten so many people begging me in my DMs for Joanna's story. They're like, "Is book two Joanna's story?" So book two is written, and the excerpts at the end of the book. I know some people don't like to read excerpts, but it's called "Love Is a War Song," and it is a celebrity romance. So you have a Muskogee pop star who has to go into hiding, and she has to go back to her estranged grandmother's ranch in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, on the Muskogee Reservation, where
Mhm.
she learns about her culture, and she meets Lucas, a ranch hand who is very, very unhappy that she's there. So you have some grumpy sunshine. They have to make a truce and a deal, and um, so many fun shenanigans. When asked like if I know what I'm writing towards, I love writing towards set piece, like comedic set pieces. So there are things in my mind. Like I always knew with Ember that there was going to be the only one bed trope, and like how that was going to play out, because I have booked so many of those types of conferences, and like I'm like I know how this can happen. And they did try to like put somebody in a coat room cot once. So anyway, for Love Is a War Song, it's like there's stickball, and there's a tornado and a cellar scene. So joyful, so fun, indulgent. I'm writing because like these are the stories I want to read, and I'm just hoping other people want to read them too.
Well, like I said, Ember is awesome, and I think everybody should read it if they have not yet. And I never got the chance to put the link in the chat because I was chatting so much, but I will send it out to everybody. And oh, I forgot to ask, when will that be coming out? You said it's done.
Yeah, July 2025, next year,
July
next summer.
2025. Okay, so for everybody who's picking up Ember now, you have a little bit of time, so savor it.
Thank you so much, you guys, for coming. I see all the comments. You guys are wonderful.
Yes, it's been an awesome group. Thank you all for your questions. Danica, again, thank you so much for doing this. I know you're busy with your book launch, but I so appreciate you taking your time to chat with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Chick Good
Good night, everybody.